A black man walks up to the entrance of a high-profile even this event, but the security guard blocks him. "This is for VIPs only." The guard sneers. 5 minutes later, the truth comes out, and someone's getting fired on the spot. Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel and comment below where you are watching from. The grand ballroom of the luxury hotel was buzzing with energy. Elegant chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the crowd as guests mingled, laughter and conversation filling the air. Tonight was no ordinary night. It was one of the biggest business networking events of the year, an exclusive gathering of CEOs, investors, and industry leaders. And at the center of it all, a man named Malcolm Hayes, a self-made billionaire, a visionary entrepreneur, and the host of this entire event. But despite being the man who built this empire from nothing, who had poured his blood, sweat, and tears into making this event possible, tonight, he was about to learn that even wealth and power cannot always shield you from prejudice. Because before he could step inside his own event, security stopped him cold. And within minutes, that decision would cost someone their job. Malcolm Hayes stepped out of his sleek black luxury car, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored suit as he made his way toward the hotel entrance. He was not just here to attend. He was the man of the hour. His company had sponsored this event, organized every detail, and personally invited every major player in the room. This was his moment to celebrate success, to stand in the very space he had fought for years to reach. But as he approached the red velvet ropes leading to the ballroom entrance, a tall security guard stepped forward, blocking his path. "Hold it right there, sir," the guard said, holding up a hand. Malcolm stopped, raising an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" The security guard gave him a once-over, his eyes flickering over Malcolm's expensive suit, but with an undeniable air of skepticism. "This is a private event," the guard said flatly. "Guests only." Malcolm blinked. "I know," he replied, keeping his voice measured. "I am supposed to be here." The guard's expression did not change. "Name?" Malcolm let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Malcolm Hayes." The guard frowned, pulling out a clipboard with the guest list. His eyes scanned the names. Then he looked up again, unimpressed. "You are not on the list." Malcolm narrowed his eyes. "I assure you, I am on that list," he said. "In fact, I am the one who put that list together." The guard let out a small, dismissive scoff. "Right." That one word sent a sharp wave of irritation through Malcolm. He knew exactly what was happening. The doubt in the guard's voice. The way he had barely glanced at the list before dismissing him. The way his body language screamed suspiciones if Malcolm had snuck in off the street instead of arriving in a six-figure luxury car. Malcolm exhaled slowly. He had faced this kind of treatment before. And despite all his success, despite everything he had built, here he was, still being treated like he did not belong. He pulled out his phone. "I will call the event coordinator." But before he could dial, the guard stepped closer, voice firm. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to leave." Malcolm stilled. "Excuse me?" "I do not want to have to escalate this," the guard said. "This event is for VIPs. If you do not have an invite, you cannot be here." The audacity hit Malcolm like a slap. He was the VIP. He was the reason this event even existed. And now, some undertrained security guard who had not even bothered to verify his identity properly was treating him like an intruder at his own party. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "I have no intention of leaving," he said, his voice now steely and cold. "And I strongly suggest you check again before you make a mistake you cannot take back." But the guard was not listening. He had already made up his mind. And what he said next was the final straw. "Look, man," the guard said, his voice dropping into a condescending tone. "I do not know how you got past the main entrance, but let me save you some trouble. This is not the type of event for people like you." Silence. The words hung in the air like a slap. Malcolm's blood ran cold. He could feel the stares of nearby guests who had heard the comment. Some were shocked. Others, they just looked away, pretending they had not witnessed it. His fingers tightened around his phone, his pulse hammering in his ears. "People like me?" he repeated, his voice now low and dangerous. The guard shifted slightly, realizing too late that he had crossed a line. "I did not mean it like that." "Oh, I think you did." Malcolm cut in, his patience gone. "And now, you are about to find out exactly who I am." Before the guard could respond, Malcolm hit dial. The phone rang once, then twice. And when the event coordinator answered, Malcolm's entire tone changed. "I need you at the entrance. Now." There was no questioning, no hesitation. Because the moment his voice was recognized, the entire situation was about to flip ***. The security guard stood his ground, still oblivious to the storm he had just unleashed. He had no idea that Malcolm Hayes was not just another guest. He was not a random businessman trying to sneak in. He was the man who made this event possible. And in the next few minutes, the guard was about to learn that disrespecting the wrong person could end a career in an instant. It took less than 2 minutes for the event coordinator, Rachel Foster, to appear at the entrance. She was breathless, flustered, and clearly panicked, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she rushed toward Malcolm. "Mr. Hayes," she called out, her voice dripping with urgency. The moment the security guard heard that last name, his entire posture stiffened. He could feel the shift in energy, the way the nearby staff members suddenly looked at him differently. Something was wrong, but he did not know just how badly he had screwed up yet. Rachel skidded to a stop in front of Malcolm, her face a mixture of horror and guilt. "I am so sorry," she blurted out. "I had no idea this was happening." The guard frowned. He looked from Rachel to Malcolm, then back to Rachel. "Wait, you know him?" he asked, his confusion growing. Rachel turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Of course I know him," she snapped. "He is the owner of this event." The words landed like a bomb. The guard's breath caught in his throat. The owner?" he repeated, his voice faltering. Rachel did not even acknowledge him. Instead, she turned back to Malcolm, her voice full of regret. "Please come in. Your VIP table is waiting." Malcolm did not move immediately. He simply let the silence hang, watching as the security guard realized the full weight of his mistake. And the way his face drained of color? It was all the confirmation Malcolm needed. The guard tries to backtrack, but it is too late. The security guard's confidence crumbled before everyone's eyes. He had been so sure of himself just minutes ago, so sure that Malcolm did not belong. And now, he was scrambling. "Sir," he started, his voice shaky now. Malcolm tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "You what?" he asked, his tone calm but dangerous. The guard swallowed. I was just following protocol. I did not mean to." Malcolm raised a hand, cutting him off effortlessly. "Do not insult my intelligence by pretending this was about protocol." The guard's lips parted, but no words came out. Because Malcolm was right. This was not about security procedures. This was about assumptions. This was about bias. And the fact that he had just treated the wealthiest man in the building like a trespasser? There was no way out of this. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife when yet another figure arrived at the entrance. The hotel manager. A middle-aged man with slicked back hair and a tailored suit. His expression was a mix of concern and barely contained rage. He had clearly heard the news, and the moment he laid eyes on Malcolm, he plastered on his most apologetic smile. "Mr. Hayes," he greeted, his voice overly formal now. "I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry we are for this mishap." Malcolm remained silent. He let the man sweat for a few seconds before finally speaking. "Is this how you train your staff?" The hotel manager visibly winced. "Absolutely not, sir. This was," he glared at the security guard before continuing, "a severe lapse in judgment." Malcolm's eyes did not leave the guard. "A lapse in judgment?" he repeated. The manager straightened his tie nervously. "Yes, sir, and I assure you, it will be dealt with immediately." The words hung in the air. Then, "You are fired." The security guard froze. His mouth opened, as if to argue. But one glance at the hotel manager's stern expression, and he knew. There was nothing to argue. The room felt heavier now, the weight of his mistake crushing down on him. Just 5 minutes ago, he was so sure that Malcolm did not belong. Now, he was the one being thrown out. As the guard turned to leave, Malcolm called out, stopping him mid-step. "Remember this moment." The guard turned slowly, his expression a mix of regret and humiliation. "Remember how quickly everything can change when you judge someone based on what you think you know." Silence. Then, without another word, the guard walked out of the building for the last time. Rachel cleared her throat. "Shall we?" she asked, gesturing toward the grand ballroom. Malcolm nodded, stepping past the velvet ropes with the authority he had always deserved. And as he entered the ballroom, heads turned in recognition. Because unlike that security guard, everyone in this room knew exactly who he was. And tonight, he was going to make sure the world knew too. What happens next? The security guard had lost everything. But Malcolm? His story was just getting started. Because within minutes, the internet would explode with what had just happened. And this moment would become a turning point in a much bigger conversation. Because when a billionaire gets denied entry to his own event, the world pays attention. And what Malcolm did next would leave everyone speechless. As Malcolm stepped into the grand ballroom, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. The security guard had tried to shut him out. But now, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Guests turned their heads, conversations hushed, and eyes followed him as he walked toward the stage, the man they had been waiting for. But there was something different now, because some of them had seen what just happened at the entrance. And those who had not, they were about to find out. The energy in the room changes. Malcolm did not need to announce his presence. The moment he entered, people moved aside for him, not just out of respect, but out of the sudden realization of what had almost happened. The very man who had built this empire, who had created the opportunity for everyone in this room to be here tonight, had been denied entry to his own success. And now, with every step he took toward the stage, the reality of that moment weighed down on the room. People who had once shaken his hand with fake smiles, who had doubted his rise to power, who had whispered behind his back, were now watching in awkward silence. Because tonight, the truth had been exposed. The speech that left the room silent. As Malcolm took the microphone, he could feel the tension thick in the air. Good. Because he wanted them to feel it. He exhaled slowly, then began. Tonight is a celebration. His voice was calm but powerful, carrying through the massive ballroom. A celebration of innovation, of hard work, of breaking barriers and achieving what many thought was impossible. A few nods. A murmur of agreement. It is also a night where we reflect on where we have been and where we are going. Malcolm let his eyes sweep across the crowd. And before I walked in here, I was given a very sharp reminder of exactly where we are. The murmurs stopped. Silence stretched across the room. People shifted uncomfortably. Those who had been at the entrance just minutes ago, they froze, already knowing where this was going. But Malcolm? He was just getting started. "Let me tell you all a quick story," he continued, his tone casual, almost too casual. A man walks up to the doors of an event he spent months planning, an event he funded, organized, and personally invited every guest to. A pause. But before he can step inside, he is stopped. Eyes darted across the room. A few executives suddenly looked very interested in their wine glasses. Not because he does not belong there. Malcolm's voice lowered, his words cutting deeper. But because someone else decided he did not look like he belonged there. The weight of those words hit the crowd like a brick wall. Some people nodded solemnly. Others? They just looked away. Because they knew. They had seen it before. And some had even been the ones doing it. Now imagine, Malcolm continued, that this man was not me. The statement lingered in the air, unsettling. Imagine if this had been someone else. A young entrepreneur coming here for their first big opportunity. A talented mind ready to change the industry. A rising star who deserved a seat at this very table. A long pause. And imagine if they had turned around and left, thinking they truly did not belong. The silence was deafening. Because suddenly, this was not just about Malcolm. This was about every single person who had ever been dismissed, rejected, and underestimated. "This is why we need change," Malcolm said. his voice steady, unwavering, not just in business, not just in events like this, but in the way we see each other, the way we treat each other. His final words? They landed like a hammer. Because if success does not erase the doubt people have about you, then what will? The crowd erupted into applause. But not just any applause. A standing ovation. Because Malcolm had not just called out discrimination, he had forced the room to face it. And there was no looking away now. As Malcolm stepped down from the stage, people rushed toward him. Business leaders, investors, CEOs who had once seen him as just another competitor were now eager to shake his hand. Because tonight, he had shifted the conversation. And the security guard? The one who had judged Malcolm before even asking a question. He was nowhere to be seen. Because he had let his bias cost him everything. And Malcolm? He had let his strength prove him right. 6. Ripple effect and aftermath. Expanded 1,000 words. Completing the story. The energy in the ballroom was completely transformed. Malcolm Hayes had just delivered a speech that would be remembered for years, a speech that forced everyone in that room to confront an uncomfortable truth. But outside those doors, the impact was just beginning. Because news of what happened had already started to spread like wildfire. And within hours, the entire world would be talking about it. The video that changed everything. Malcolm had not planned on making this incident public, but someone else had already done it for him. A journalist attending the event had witnessed the confrontation at the entrance. They had filmed the entire exchange the moment Malcolm was stopped, the guard's dismissive tone, and the exact moment Rachel Foster, the event coordinator, ran in and exposed the truth. The video was posted online before Malcolm even finished his speech. And by the time he walked off the stage, it was already going viral. The caption? Billionaire denied entry to his own event, security guard fired on the spot. The comments section exploded. This is exactly why we need to talk about racial bias. Even a billionaire is not immune. Imagine working as security and thinking you can block the guy who owns the event. Wow. The way he handled this with grace and power. Respect. In just a few hours, news outlets picked up the story. Major networks debated how deep-rooted biases still existed in professional spaces. Talk shows invited Malcolm to speak about his experience, his journey, and what this moment meant for change. This was no longer just about one security guard making a bad call. This was about the world seeing, in real time, how even the most successful black men could still be questioned about their place. The hotel's public apology. Damage control begins. The hotel where the event was hosted, they were in full crisis mode. Within 24 hours, they released a formal apology statement. We deeply regret the unacceptable incident that took place at our venue. Our staff failed to uphold the values of inclusivity and respect, and for that, we sincerely apologize to Mr. Hayes and our valued guests. Effective immediately, we are reviewing our policies and implementing additional diversity and sensitivity training for all employees. But for Malcolm, words were not enough. Because apologies did not fix the problem. Real action did. And that is exactly what he was about to demand. A week after the event, Malcolm called a press conference. But this was not about his personal experience anymore. This was about creating real, lasting change. Standing in front of a room packed with reporters, he spoke clearly, powerfully. This is not just about me. This is about every person who has ever been turned away, disrespected, or judged before they even opened their mouth. We need to do better. And that starts now. Then, he made an announcement that no one expected. His company, Hayes Enterprises, would partner with major corporations, hotels, and event spaces to create mandatory diversity and inclusion training programs for staff. We are not just talking about change anymore, he said. We are making it happen. And the business world listened. Because when a billionaire speaks, people pay attention. And when that billionaire demands change, they start making moves. Malcolm Hayes. His influence skyrocketed. More business leaders reached out, wanting to support his initiative. His company became a leading force in corporate inclusivity programs. Rachel Foster, event coordinator, She received major recognition for stepping in that night. Malcolm personally promoted her, and she became one of his top executives. The hotel chain. After losing several high-profile partnerships, they revamped all hiring and training policies to ensure something like this never happened again. The security guard. The man who had once dismissed Malcolm Hayes as a nobody, he struggled to find another job in security because his name was now attached to one of the biggest corporate scandals of the year. And no company wanted that baggage. 1 year later, the same event was being held at the same luxury hotel. But this time, things were different. Malcolm Hayes walked up to the entrance once again. The red carpet was out. The security guards? They recognized him instantly. "Good evening, Mr. Hayes. Your table is ready." Malcolm smirked. Not out of arrogance, not out of pettiness, but because he knew this was not just about him anymore. This was about everyone who would come after him. And tonight, there was no doubt about who belonged here, because this time, no one dared to question it. Bias still exists, even in the highest places. But when you stand up, when you refuse to be silenced, you force the world to change. If you believe in standing up for what is right, subscribe for more powerful stories.